All right, everyone. So I want you to grab a blank piece of paper and I want you to follow along with everything I do. All right. So, first to start out with, we're going to draw a triangle. So just draw a big triangle. I would make it take up like most of your paper. All right. And then you're going to divide that triangle into 4 sections. So something like this almost looks like a food pyramid, right? And that's sort of what we're doing, except we're doing it for the ecosystem. So what we are doing now is called a trophic pyramid. And a trophic pyramid is a diagram used to show the amount of energy that flows in an ecosystem. So energy flows, matter cycles. There's a big difference there, right? You think of matter cycling, that's when we would talk about like carbon being passed from us in the form of CO2 to plants, and then we eat the plants and get that carbon back. And you can pass carbon on and on and on. Energy doesn't do that. When you lose energy, you cannot get that same energy back. It's gone. You've got to go get it from another source, right? So here's how we're going to show that. Honestly, this is a really visual food chain. So it always shows a food chain. And we talked about that a lot last week. So what do you have as your parts of the food chain? Well, you have your plant. That plant gets eaten by an animal. That animal gets eaten by an animal. That animal gets eaten by an animal. But now you should know from last week there are better names for that. So let's call this bottom one the producer. Oh, let's take that off of there. There we go. Now, remember, producers are called producers because they make their own food. Hopefully you are saying along with me. And then producers get eaten by primary. That's an A. There we go. Consumers. Okay. Primary consumers get eaten by secondary consumers. And remember, if you don't get a part of this, it's a video, so you can just back it up. And then secondary consumers get eaten by what is called tertiary consumers. And that just means it's the third consumer in line after producers. So if we have this diagram, then the first thing you need to think of is, where does all of this energy come from? Well, what's the ultimate source for all energy on the entire Earth? It's the sun, right? So I'd like you, in order to remember that, draw a little sun up here. Okay, so I got my little sun. Maybe yours is a better sun than mine is. Maybe yours is wearing sunglasses. That's ironic and silly. In order to show that that sun is emitting energy, we're going to use arrows. So I had you use arrows with the food chain and food webs. You saw arrows showing that the energy goes from one thing to another. So I'm going to draw an arrow from my sun to the producer, right? Because that energy is going from the sun to the producer, which happens to be a plant. I'm going to say that my producer is a flower of some sort. All right, there's a flower, there's some leaves, there's... Oh my goodness, if my pen worked, this would be probably just as bad, let's be real. But there's my flower. It's trying. And then my energy goes from the sun to the flower, and then my flower, let's say it gets eaten by a caterpillar. Oh, I don't want an orange caterpillar. I want a green caterpillar, right? Let's make it as caterpillar-y as we can. And he's smiling and he looks ridiculous. I can already hear Mrs. Knoll making fun of this caterpillar. And then my caterpillar, let's say it gets eaten by, how about a frog? Oh no, I do that to myself. Now I have to draw a frog. Okay, so frog time. Eyeball, eyeball. Here's its mouth. It's a happy frog. It's got like 4 legs. Well, that's normal. It looks like it has 5 legs, but it's also trying really hard. Oh my goodness, that's the worst frog I've ever drawn. Cool. Okay, and then let's have our frog go ahead and get eaten by any takers. Any ideas? How about a hawk? Why the heck not? So, oh goodness, I'm just gonna draw the head of a hawk up here. All right. If you are as great as drawing as I am, feel free to show that you can use, like if you're doing this on OneNote, just use pictures from Google. And if you can hear that, that is my cat bringing me a toy and he's just yowling. So that's awesome. Thank you, Beans. Yeah, that's good job. Okay. Now back to the trophic pyramid. We need to show energy moving, right? So it goes from the sun to the producer, and then from that producer, we're going to show an arrow going to the primary consumer. And then from the primary consumer, it goes to the secondary. And then from the secondary, it goes to the tertiary, right? There's my arrows. But here's the kicker. When you eat something, remember, nothing's ever 100% efficient. So when you eat something, you don't get all of the energy that thing had. You just don't. We are not nearly that efficient. And so actually the amount of energy that you actually get is only 10%. So when that flower gets eaten by the worm, only 10% of that energy is passed on. When that worm is eaten by the frog, that frog only gets 10% of that energy. And when that hawk eats that frog, it only gets 10% of that energy. And so something I want you to think about here is, if I was getting ready to run a marathon, I need a ridiculous amount of energy, right? So before I run that marathon, what meal should I eat? Should I eat a whole bunch of steak? Or should I eat a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables, right? And so you want to think about which would have the most energy. Well, if I eat steak, I would be eating a secondary consumer. If I ate salad, I'd be eating a primary consumer. And looks like primary consumers have, or I'm sorry, if I ate salad, I'd be eating a producer. And it looks like producers have a lot more energy. I did that all backwards. Than steak, which is a primary. So the cow would be a primary consumer. Salad would be a producer. That producer has a lot more energy. Look how much bigger the base of the pyramid is than the next step up. To further visualize this, we're going to do a little bit of math. So don't let that scare you. This is probably the easiest math you'll do in this class. So for the producer, your producer, let's say it has 1,000 calories. Now, when we talk about trophic pyramids, I'll add this over to the side here. We talk about the unit of energy as a calorie. You've heard calories before. So calories are a unit of heat energy. All right, a unit of heat energy. That heat energy is what is passed from one to the next. And so if I have my flowers, they get 1,000 calories inside them. And then my inchworm, or my little caterpillar here, how many calories would it get from eating the flowers? Well, it would get 10%, like I said over here. So it's 10% of 1,000. In order to figure that out, you got to start at this decimal point and just move it over one place, right? Move it over one place. So if we move it over one place, I go from 1,000 to 100 calories. Okay, now let's say when my frog eats my inchworm, how many calories does it get? Well, we take that decimal point and move it over 1. I go from 100 to 10 calories. And then when my frog gets eaten by an eagle, let's move that decimal point over 1. Right, so when I move it over 1, it goes from 10 calories to 1 calorie. So going back to my marathon example, if I ate the salad, the producer, I could get 10% of 1,000 calories. If I eat the steak, I eat the primary consumer, I get 10% of 100 calories. I get more energy from eating the producers, which is why a lot of people before a long distance race will eat pasta, because that's a grain, so they're going to get more energy from it. One thing we are missing are, any guesses? What are we missing in this ecosystem? And I'll draw a little picture here. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Here you go. It's a mushroom, because we're missing our decomposers. So, go ahead and put your decomposers over here. Now, when these things die, they are what get eaten by the decomposer, but they still only get how much of that energy? How much energy is passed on? It's the 10% rule. They still get 10%. Now, is it exactly 10% every single time? No, but that's in general a decent rule. And the most important thing to realize here is that you only get a little bit of energy from the original organism that was your meal. You only get a little bit of that energy. That is my daughter yelling. She's really excited about trophic pyramids. So if this decomposer gets 10% of a producer, how much energy is that? Well, 10% of 1,000 is how much? That would be 100 calories, right? How about 10% of that primary consumer? That's 10% of 100, which would be 10 calories, right? And then 10% of the secondary consumer. Oh my goodness. Okay, 10% of that secondary consumer, which would be if that frog dies, how much energy would that get, the mushroom get if it decomposed that frog? 10% of 10 is 1 calorie. Okay, and then how about 10% of the eagle? That eagle dies, that fungi ends up, the mushroom ends up decomposing it. So 1 calorie, 10% of that, if you move that decimal point over, would be 0.1 calories. All right. So hopefully you followed along and you've got all of this information written down. If this doesn't make any sense to you, please email me with questions or let me know. But hopefully what you see here is this is just one big food chain, right? We go from the producer to the primary consumer, right? So our energy goes from here, to here, to here, to here. So hopefully you just see it's a food chain with a little bit added on, right? We added on some math and we added on that sun, because we got to know that that sun is the ultimate source. Oops, not sub. Subways are good too, though. That sun is the ultimate source of all energy on Earth, right? Ultimate source. So if the sun goes, that's bad, right? Because nothing else really has any way to get energy. But please let us know if you have questions. Your work for today is just to copy this down and get ready to make your own tomorrow, all right? So that way I can see that you understand this. We miss you guys. Let us know if you need anything. See ya.